Welcome back to the class, everyone. We are here once again to talk about roster building on a budget. One of the biggest gear crunches in the entire game, from both beginning game to end game, is Kyrotech. So today we want to look at what are the best budget Kyrotech teams. So a slightly further explanation on what this video is going to be about. I want to look at every single team that is using a low amount of Kyrotech when you consider the team as a whole. As previously mentioned, it is a really big gear crunch, and maybe you just got done doing something like Bad Batch or Inquisitors where you literally burned through over 1,000 just on one team before you even got to gear 12, and maybe you're looking for a break to be able to build up your stock for something else. That being said, when we're talking about low Kyrotech, this is before gear 12. A lot of the newer characters have about 300 to 400 Kyrotech before they even get to gear 12. Every character has Kyrotech post gear 12, so we're not talking about the post gear 12. And to be even more specific, this list is not going to contain teams where their best variation has 0 Kyrotech before gear 12. We actually already made a video about that. I'm going to put it in the description below because I haven't figured out how to use that bubble thing over there. But if you want to check that out, that's where you'll find Grievous and Geonosians that are really solid teams, but don't have any characters that require Kyrotech, so they don't really belong in the budget Kyrotech category. The other thing I want to say is we're only going to be looking at teams that require anywhere from 200 to 300, and we're going to look at the two different numbers separately just so we have a fair comparison, because I really do want to rank this from worst to best. So getting off right now with the 200 Kyrotechs per team, I think the worst team for 200 Kyrotechs is going to actually be First Order. And the worst team is a little bit odd to say because this team is actually really good. If you don't have SLKR, this is about the best First Order team out there right now. With First Order, TIE Pilot, and Hux on the same team, everyone is going to start with advantage right off to begin with. And if you have the Omicron and are in GAC, that advantage is going to give you 50% critical damage and 100 speed. And with whether you take Crew or Hux's lead, both are very good. But Crew's, it has a lot of turn meter when you start to get critical hits, and then you start to jump with stuff like Xylo using his AoE every time, which, by the way, the AI does do that. The team just becomes very hard to take down if you don't have any way to stop their turn meter gains or anywhere to interrupt it or counter it or something like that. It's quite powerful, and it also builds you a good team for that Galactic Legend SLKR once you do eventually get there. Most of the squad is a pilot is why I believe these four right here, so you kind of get to double dip in that fashion. So again, the worst 200 Kyrotech team is still actually a really good team. Next up is going to be Bounty Hunters. This is pretty versatile here in a similar fashion. If you're in GAC and you're wanting to get ahead, you can apply Zam's Omicron. She takes the speed, or rather she gains speed from all of her Bounty Hunter allies. I believe it is an extra 20, she increases her offense, health, max protection, 5% speed, there it is, for each other Bounty Hunter ally, and then she dishes 20% of that back out to her entire team, so you can actually get two speeds like 400 on Bosk and Grief, who can really get the party started. And then Mando, who is the Kyrotech character here, he's the one who's costing us 200 to be able to make this team. He's going to be the one to not only give everyone turn meter so that you can actually keep going before the enemy, but also get an annihilate off on one of the critical enemies that there is out there, like Dash or Bam or Maul or whatever it is, so that you can actually get going, don't have to worry about a whole bunch of damage output from them. You can't substitute Bosk for Aura and then maybe pull out Dengar and put Bosk in that slot, depending on the opponent you're facing if you can't get access to contract. But overall, at 200 Kyrotech, being able to beat some of the teams that it does beat, which, by the way, speaking of beating the other Beskar Mando, he requires 500 Kyrotech before gear 12. I guess it was in the very beginning of when they were doing that. That's ridiculous. Anyways, and the best team for a cheap Kyrotech amount is going to be Commander Luke Skywalker, at least for the 200 category. The team's just really stinking great. It has the opportunity to challenge some Galactic Legends if they are not using the right comp, and even without that, they still beat General Skywalker, who's a legendary team that's also very good. They can beat some really weak Starkiller comps. They have a wide range of other things they can beat, even if they're not modded properly, which not all teams can say that. A lot of teams, they have to have a specific modding or turn order go first. CLS will beat the majority of weaker things without even really touching mods. There's just so much turn meter and so much damage built off of max health due to 3PO's exposes, as well as Chewbacca himself as max health damage from his uniques. So, very powerful team. You can get it on a budget. 3PO, despite coming out when he did, does not require Kyrotech to my knowledge, and then the other characters are a little bit harder to accept or to get access to, but at the same time, if your main bottleneck is Kyrotech, that's where you want to be going. So now we're going to be moving on into the 300 Kyrotech salvage territory, which it's going to seem to be a similar theme where we're taking a team and just looking at one character that came to lift them up recently. And I'm not gonna lie, this makes me really sad, and I hope I'm wrong, and if someone's seen like world-breaking things, please let me know. But the worst teams for 300 Kyrotech I think are going to be Ewoks and Wookiees, which is kind of ironic given their names. But yeah, Princess Nissa, we just got her in game, and while she does make the Ewoks significantly better, I don't know if the team is actually countering anything relevant that we have out there, or at least anything, a team that we weren't already beating. And maybe they can be a timeout risk on defense because of Nissa's basic, but again, take this with a grain of salt. I take the Wookiees with a grain of salt for that matter too. They're very new teams, so I don't really know all that much about them. But you can build this team for very low Kyrotech. I just don't know. I really don't know if I would suggest for the majority of players to take these to full relics. I mean, they might be a fun B team to have on the side, but they don't really fit the definition of a core team. For Gear 12, sure, that's fine. You need a lot of these characters in Gear 12, or around Gear 12-ish, to be able to get 3PO. You can do it at lower, though. There's some other members in here that are also required, like Veteran Smuggler is going to be required for Rey if you go that route, as well as Mission and Zalba are required for the Revan. So there is a bit of an overlap here where we have to get them to at least Gear 12, but I don't know if I would specifically go out of your way to say, hey, I'm low on Kyrotech, I should build that team. Maybe we don't start there. Next up are going to be pretty situationally good teams, and that is Sortie and Sana. Both of them require 300 Kyrotech on the leaderships themselves, and then they're going to utilize, this is what I like about this team, they're going to utilize a lot of characters that you probably have built for entirely different reasons, maybe at Gear 12 or a low relic level, and that is the droids, R2, BB-8. They're both legendaries and end up being required for other things. IG-88 as well as, and HK-47 are actually both required for fleets. So it's a team that you eventually build up in some fashion, and if you just do Sortie herself, giving her again the 300 Kyrotech she wants, you get a full team. And while this team is arguably skippable, you can use it and you can get great effect to it, especially if you're not wanting to do Galactic Legend back to back to back to back, which I don't suggest doing. It's nice to look at your roster, see what units you have kind of lying around that maybe aren't in a team right now, and that's going to be specific. Maybe you are using R2 and BB-8 in another team, but for the most part, it is a solid team for 300 Kyrotech, or at least it moves above the, I would consider, luxury tier. Sana's going to be a very similar vein. The only difference is her characters come through Jedi Knight Luke. If you've done, or you have Jedi Knight Luke for Jabba or JML, just for him himself, you already have Rebel Layer, or Rolo, Officer Organa over there. You have Captain Han Solo and Lando, so you already have the pretty core elements to a decent Sana team. You add her in, maybe you're going after Afra at some point with Stormtrooper Han, and you have a pretty decent team. Again, these are not teams that I use at the very end game, but for a lot of people, again, for those of you without 7 Galactic Legends, which is the vast majority of players, they're great additions for both GAC or Conquest or TW. They have a few different homes that they can work in really well, especially the droid one. There always ends up being one droid feat because they gave Sortie a Conquest Omicron a while ago. Now I feel, I guess, indebted to do that every single time. Moving on to what I would consider core teams. So while these two up here were pretty luxury and you can get some use out of them, these two here are a little bit more situational. They can be very good depending on what you're doing with your roster. These are core teams. They're, in my opinion, should be the core to most people's rosters out there. They just let you do things in a variety of game modes that every player, I think, should be able to do. Dash is going to take advantage of a lot of the scoundrels that most people have right now. He is the only one on the team that does require a Kyrotech. The very good GAC team, again, with having this, you have to kind of go in front of it to be able to kill it mentality. It's hard to come from behind unless you're using a really strong team like Treya, but overall holds a lot of value in that regard. They have damage, they have survivability, they have revives, they have a good taunting tank. They have all of the basic elements that make a modern team good. Iden as well, very much along that line. She does rely, I would say, a little bit more than Dash does on her GAC Omicron, and it is worth saying, she really doesn't have to be given her 300 Kyrotech. You don't unlock some magical power when she's just sitting at Gear 12 like ours currently is. You can use her at a lower rank than that, and it's really not that big of a deal because she constantly revives. I guess you might open up a few counters if you're leaving this on defense and she's super weak. You bring in like Boba and Executor, and then suddenly she's gone because she was Gear 7 and it was really easy to execute her. But for the most part, I mean, this will even beat Relic Mon Mothmas, assuming they don't have a good Datacron, which for a lot of people, that is something they're going to see quite consistently. It is also fun in Conquest with the Amplify Agony debuff, because you get to go first, and then you kill their entire team before they move, because it doesn't matter how much speed CG gave them if you always are going to go first right out the bat. Next up is going to be, again, core teams, maybe a slightly higher tier. I do want to talk about the Imperial Troopers for a second. Gosh, I feel like this is probably, I wouldn't say they're my favorite team for me, Calvin, as a player, but I just think they're one of the best teams in the entire game from an accessibility standpoint, or from a value standpoint. So what we're looking at here right now, we don't have a Dark Trooper or Gideon because that would break our 300 Kyrotech rule. We do have Piet, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, I know I am. But Emperor's Trap, to me, is one of the best Zetas in the entire game, because it doesn't matter if you're low gear or if you're not a very good attacker. Eventually, once you start adding 30-60% offense to the entire team, you're gonna start to hit hard, especially when every single person in here is coming to assist, because of range is unique, as well as Veer's and Admiral Piet's calls to assist. I don't love Shore Trooper here. Obviously, Dark would be the better option, but again, that would break our Kyrotech rule. But even then, he's not terrible. He actually does something kind of fun here, where whenever another allied empire uses a special ability, so, you know, any Imperial Trooper, if Shore Trooper is taunting, they gain 15% turn meter, and he recovers 10% health. So he does aid a little bit in the turn meter gain. He starts pre-taunting, and then he gets to use his regroup whenever your taunt goes away as well. So it's another way to boost the team's turn meter, which is one of the main mechanics that gets it going in front of teams and being able to wipe them out. Next up is going to be Padme. I thought about splitting up Padme and Qui-Gon Jinn, but for the sake of, again, wanting to have a team that has value outside of GAC, we didn't do that. While Iden is a good example of a team that's much better in GAC, but it's usable outside, Qui-Gon Jinn arguably just isn't usable at all outside of GAC, and I guess maybe in like a few really rare occasions, like in Conquest, where you need a bunch of foresight, but for the most part, it's not a good team outside of GAC. So anyways, this is the team we're looking at building. Padme herself is the one using the 300 Kyrotechs. We can't take in Cat because of that, but honestly, this team is still pretty solid, and you get a lot of these from requirements, or maybe they're not a requirement for yet, but they will be one day where you can build them up. GK is really accessible now with the MK2 changes, and the rest of them can be gotten from nodes semi-easily, so it is a easier team to build up. I will say though, Padme for a Kyrotech character also does still have a lot of stun guns and Carbonti, but they actually come through an event. I remember when CG had to do that. Next up, this is another one to take with a massive grain of salt, and that is Phoenix. We really don't know a whole lot about this team. The initial testing has shown a lot of potential. The big thing that it's beating right now, that's a really big deal, is Third Sister, the Inquisitor team that arguably takes a Galactic Legend or Treya to beat in GAC, or really even outside of it. They can beat Galactic Legends even without their Omicrons. And Rex has a very specific mechanic with this cleansing and the way he gains turn meter that lets him actually beat the team. I don't know if that just means the team is good, or if it means it has a specific interaction that lets it be the budget counter to the Inquisitor team. I don't really know. So I'm going to put them at a higher ranking right now. Maybe they're even higher than this. Maybe they're lower, but they're somewhere in the mix. And this team is actually just a little bit awkward to talk about in general, because Rex isn't even farmable yet. So maybe again, take it with a grain of salt. Maybe plan it out. That's a character you want to get later. But as for right now, if you're short on Kyrotech, maybe farming unaccelerated characters is the best idea for you in general. Next up, again, these are core teams that I think are doing a lot of damage. You're going to be able to use them in a lot of game modes to a really good extent. One of the reasons why I like Nightsister so much is because they have an assault battle. With the help of Marin, even Challenge Tier 2 is pretty accessible for most players. 3 is still not super easy if you don't have the whole team relic like myself, but they can punch up quite a bit on offense. Defense, they still really lack any type of defense against anything that kills revives like gas, or certain bounty hunter mechanics like Django and Boba's annihilates. But the team has gone up significantly. They now have an answer to cleanses. They have an answer to debuffs. They also kind of killed the whole instant defeat destroy effect. So still have quite a few things going for them. They can be used on offense to help tear down some Galactic Legend teams. Marj, team's just really stinking good. Primarily probably on offense, unless your opponent doesn't have Adrad, then it actually could be kind of fun to use on defense. Marj herself is super fast, and she's just everything that Palp ever wanted. She gets to go out in front, put down Tenacity down, which is a huge deal for him, and then just start the debuffs going, gives him turn meter through his own leadership, through her own unique. Tons of stuff going on in this team that's just really hard to get around. you don't have the exact right tools to be able to take it down. And now we're getting kind of the top tier, where we saw it a little bit with Nightsisters. This is where teams may not be consistently beating Galactic Legends every single time, but they're starting to challenge them. And that's kind of how the hierarchy of teams is. You start with Galactic Legends, super boring, and then you work your way down and it becomes a lot more nuanced. And these teams have a shot in varying circumstances where they can do that. So Jedi Knight Revan team, actually in itself, it doesn't require any Kyrotechs, but if you add in Jedi Knight Luke, they do start to have a shot against Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. I guess if you add an armor, then you break the Kyrotech rule again. But this team, as it is, actually this is supposed to be Hoda here, but same difference as far as Kyrotech. Would be the team that would be able to beat SLKR. It also does really well against CLS. I've struggled a little bit with Jedi Knight Revan versus CLS because they gain so much turn meter, but being able to stun 3 out of the 5, reduce their max health and protection, and overall just hit them really stinking hard, Jedi Knight Luke helps a lot with that, both in 5v5 and in 3v3s. In fact, in 3v3, I don't even take in Jedi Knight Revan. It's just like Jedi Knight Luke and a really good damage dealer in Hoda, and they typically get the job done. Next up is going to be Zori, and maybe we're overestimating this team just a little bit, but the last time I said that, everybody in the comments wanted to remind me that no, we are very much estimating them properly. The team is a nightmare. It's very good. It lifts the rest of the kind of not used resistance off the ground. I'm not sure if I would recommend going after this team if you're not going after Rey anytime soon, just because it's 4 characters you have to build up that you really get no value outside of this team specifically, and of course Rey. Zora herself also is not accelerated, so that might be another shot against him, but what the team can actually do, specifically in defense, is very good. A lot of times, what defines a good team is that it does hold well on defense. Offensive teams, we can typically find a niche for 1 or 2 teams that they're able to beat that are really strong, but to be a good defensive team is even harder, or even to be able to strip banners at a high rate against really good teams, and this team can do it. I will say that the optimal team probably does involve Resistance Hero Finn, because it's another cleanse and more, I guess it's turn meter. He gives 100% turn meter. That being said, or is it a bonus turn? Either way, it's one of them. He does break the Kyrotech rule, so he doesn't get to play it. And this team within itself is really good. Rose is an essential part of it, and Resistance Trooper and Poe Dameron are still pretty darn good. And this feels a little bit unfair to put Treya first, because when we did our video about no Kyrotech teams, Treya also got to be first, because while the best variation of the team does have Talon, the team is still really good without Talon. She does add a little bit of value against Jedi Knight Revan, where you can't just mark down Treya and kill her before her unique's able to really kick in. Talon completely stops that, because once you start going after the leader, not only does the entire team gain turn meter, but you get essentially a savior mechanic in there, where the first time they would be defeated, assuming she's active, they dispel all debuffs on the cells, recover 100% protection, or 100% health, and give 100% turn meter. Then she gains 3 stacks. So basically, it's a savior mechanic where when Jedi Knight Revan would be about to kill her, she gets to come back into the second shot. By that point, someone's dipped below 90% health, Nihilus gets an annihilate, and the whole thing is just one big mess with her in there. So she does make the team better. This is the best variation of it, I would say. And the whole team, as it is in GAC, only costs 300 Kyrotech, and the team is decent outside of there too. It does get to a new level in GAC, but it's still pretty versatile as far as like TW as well as Conquest and or maybe even TB if you get them all the high relics, although I don't really want to take them above R5 myself, so I won't. But yeah, that is going to be our list on low budget Kyrotech teams. If you want to check out the list that has teams that just have 0 Kyrotech period to get a good comparison there, or maybe check out something that you're like, all right, 200 Kyrotech is too much for me right now, Calvin, give me another option, it'll be there. But thank you guys for watching, and until the next time, stay awesome.